Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. On this video today, we're going to be talking about my favourite gigs that I attended in the 1970s. You all know that I believe that the 1970s was the best decade for music ever. It was a decade where everything happened. The amazing stuff that was happening in the 60s came to fruition, I think, in the 70s, and everything that happened after the 70s was developed in the 70s. And all aspects of music, by the way. And one of the things about the 70s is that was my era. That was when I started to go to gigs. That was when live music became such an important thing for me. I still love my live music to this day. I have been going to concerts since 1974 with the same guys as I'm still going to concerts with now. These guys up here, Kenny and John and me, that is us in London to see David Bowie in 1976, I think. And we've been going ever since. And up here, this is the guys now. This is the last picture that was taken of the three of us together at a gig. And we still absolutely love it. I guess when I'm talking about gigs in the 70s, you know, my first one I'm a wee bit embarrassed about actually. Yeah, let's just kind of get that out here. It was on, I've got it written down here, because I definitely need notes on this one. I've got it written down. It was on May the 25th, 1974 at the Edinburgh Odeon. And if I was to say to you, ahoo, my cuckoo, yeah, quietly, Alvin Stardust. Alvin Stardust. Now, in thinking back, I do think perhaps there was a girl involved, and I think I took her to the concert, or I was trying to impress her or something. I can't remember who it was. It certainly wasn't my current wife. She's never been to see Alvin Stardust. I say my current wife, my only wife. So Alvin Stardust, and I can't remember very much about the concert at all, I have to be honest with you. So that was way back in May 1974, my first ever gig. Now, the second one might sound like it wasn't much better, to be honest with you. And that was another very, very successful pop band in the early 70s. You will all remember Tiger Feet. So it was Mud. And I have to say that I wasn't expecting much, but it was rocking. It was brilliant. The balcony was bouncing. I thought the balcony was going to burst, right? There was a guy fell off the balcony. The crowd were mental. It was a whole load of proper teeny poppers, mainly girls. But it was such a gig. It was a really, really good gig. I can't remember details of it, but I just remember the vibe and the excitement of actually going to see these gigs. So the early gigs were not, let's say, brilliant, but things got better. During 1974 and 1975, we started to get into other bands like Roxy Music and Bebop Deluxe and people like that. So my live music experiences improved ever so slightly as we came through the years. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to go through the 25 best gigs that I've been at in the 1970s. Maybe a wee story about each of them. Some of them I can't remember too much about. I just remember how good the gig was, but no real details. Other ones have got crystal clear memories of the gigs, And I'm going to do some of my worst ones at the end as a little bit of bonus at the end of the video. So we're going to start off at number 25. And number 25, I've already mentioned, it was Alvin Stardust, right? And the reason it's up there in my best gigs, because it was my first gig. I'm not going to go into any more of it, but I think your first gig's an important gig, and it'll always be on my list as being an important gig because, well, it was, wasn't it? So number 24 in the list was PAL, P-A-L. That's Pace, Ashton and Lord. So it's Tony Ashton, Ian Pace and John Lord for Deep Purple. Now, of course, we were mad Deep Purple fans. Deep Purple were me and my concert boys' band, really. Well, one of them was more a kind of Zepp fan, I guess. But certainly myself and the other Kenny, we were absolutely mental Deep Purple fans. And any opportunity that we got to go and see any iteration of Deep Purple, any members of Deep Purple, you know, we would be there because they were, as I say, very, very special to us. They'll come in later on in this list, by the way. But Pace, Ashton and Lord were the 30th of March 1977, and that was at the Playhouse Theatre in Edinburgh. And again, I can't remember too much about it. Very organ dominated with John Lord. I remember that. Quite symphonic, shall we say. Some good tunes. But you know, just seeing Ian Pace live, man, he's some drummer. So that was a great gig. That was up in Edinburgh there. 23's got a funny story because it was actually Tangerine Dream, right? Now Tangerine Dream were quite big. They had just released the album called Phaedra, and Phaedra was, you know, this kind of ambient synthesizer, you know, dreamy kind of sound type thing, right? And me and the boys went through to see them, and that was on the 3rd of November 1976, and again, I was at the Usher Hall in Edinburgh. Now the tickets were £2, right? But we didn't pay for the tickets. What we did is I'm a liar. No, I'm a total liar. We did pay for the tickets, but we were round at the stage door, and the stage door was open. So we sneaked in to the gig, and we didn't sit in our seats, but we actually sat outside of the stage, like really close to the musicians, the guys playing all the keyboards here, and we were hiding behind a load of stuff, and we never got caught in the whole gig. So even though we bought tickets, which were a hefty £2 at the time, right? Even though we bought tickets, we didn't use them. So that was Tangerine Dream. Another band kind of similar, which was also at the Usher Hall, is in at 22. It was the 9th of August 1975, and that was Hawkwind. And we saw Hawkwind at the Usher Hall, and that was £1. £1! Oh, Jesus. What can you do for £1 nowadays, right? So anyway, it was £1. And yeah, Hawkwind, I can't remember too much about the gig. I remember it was quite noisy. I remember it was quite dense. But when I was, you know, what age was I then? So that was 70, so that was 75, so that's 5, 10, 6. So I was 16, right? I was 16 years old age. And they had a girl who danced up the front. Was it Sonia or Sing? Started with an S. So they had the dancer girl, and I was more interested in looking at her than I was listening to the band, to be honest with you. But that was Hawkwind, and I remember that distinctly. And I am so pleased that we saw the next band who were on at number 21. Roxy Music, the classic lineup of Roxy Music, that was on October the 27th, 1974. And to this day, when it comes to creating experimental, astonishing music, I think Roxy Music back in the 70s were something else. When you look at Pyjamarama and you look at Virginia Plain, my God, both these tracks are just amazing. So to see these performed live was something else. Phil Manzanera on guitar, Andy Mackay on saxophone, John Wetton, I think it was. Who was the bass player? Anyway, it was just fantastic to see Roxy Music. Yeah, one of these kind of gigs that you're kind of glad you didn't miss, you know, because I've never seen them since. But yeah, that was a great gig. That was number 21 on my list. We're going to go back to the Purple connection here now for number 21. Number 20. And that is the Ian Gillan band, where Ian Gillan recorded a solo album. It was quite kind of proggy actually. After in about 76 or something, I think he recorded that, or maybe 75. Anyway, on the 19th of May 76, we went to see Ian Gillan and the Ian Gillan band. It was the album I'm talking about, was one where I think it was somebody on a big rocket or something like that, if I remember correctly. And so that was Ian Gillan band, and they were absolutely superb, I must say. But like I say, we were so ingrained in the Deep Purple thing that we would have done anything to go and see anybody who was anything related to Deep Purple at the time. We also saw in the Playhouse, it's another Playhouse gig, and that was in 1977. You know, so the punk thing had just kind of kicked off, and I was getting a bit of interest in that. And on the 14th of February 1977, we went to see Frank Zappa. And I have to say, it was absolutely amazing. But some of the stuff he was doing, I mentioned this in a previous video. You know, he was there's a song called "Titties and Beer," and he got somebody up out of the crowd, took her top off, and was fondling her on the stage in front of the whole crowd while he was singing the song. It was like bizarre. I mean, you'd be arrested now. You'd be off to jail very, very quickly for doing that now. Probably he'd be off to jail then for doing that. However, he kind of got away with it. So Zappa was kind of amazing to see. I have to say, I was a bit confused at a lot of it because his output is so enormous. He's got so many albums that it's kind of, I hardly knew any of the tracks, you know. But there was unbelievable playing. He's obviously a hard taskmaster when it comes to the band because they were perfection. I remember that. So at 19 we got Frank Zappa in Edinburgh. Right, we're moving into a different genre now. For number 18, in fact, I've saw this band 3 times, all in the same place, all in the Usher Hall in Edinburgh. And I was, during the punk era, just before the punk era, in fact, I got into reggae big style. When reggae started to get big and it was hanging onto the coattails of the punk, you know, and bands like The Clash were doing Police and Thieves and things like that. I was into the ska, I loved all that kind of stuff in the earlier days, the rocksteady stuff. But then, when the proper reggae came in, the Dillingers and all that kind of stuff, I loved all that. And my favourite band of all were Culture. And Culture, the 27's Clash, is an absolute epic album. If you're looking for something to sum up what reggae was in the 70s, I don't think there's any doubt that the 27's Clash is one of the best albums out there to listen to. So anyway, we saw Culture 3 times. This one was the 20th of July 1978. I think that was the first time we saw them. First time I had saw actually a proper reggae band from Jamaica, you know. So it was great to see the proper musicians, you know. I had seen Steel Pulse, I had seen Exodus, I had seen another couple of English reggae bands, but I had never actually seen a proper Jamaican band, and that was tremendous to see that. So that was Culture. That was number 18. Number 17, Bebop Deluxe, Bill Nelson. Oh my God, what a guitar player, right? So we went to see Bill Nelson, predominantly went to see Bill Nelson actually because we were big on guitar, but we went to see Bebop Deluxe, and that was on the 25th of September 1976. And that was in the Odeon Theatre in Edinburgh, and that was a hefty £1.95. Now, there's a little story about this. I can't remember too much about the gig. I remember it was very, very good. But there is a little story about this. So as we were waiting for everybody to come out, we were in our seats and we just hanged around and waited for everybody to disappear until we got up. And when I got up and I was walking along, there was an album sitting on a chair, and I kind of looked around and there was nobody there, and I picked it up. And I was only a youngster at the time. I had no idea who these people were. And I picked the album up, and it was called "It's a Beautiful Day." And I thought, oh God, what a shite title for a band! It's a Beautiful Day. It's going to be like Brotherhood of Man, or you know, something like that. Anyway, it's a beautiful day live at the Carnegie Hall, and all my mates were laughing at me when I had this album. And then I took it home and listened to it. Absolutely blinding rock and roll, violin, guitar, Bombay Calling, oh my God, Whitebird, unbelievable songs. Anyway, that was a bonus from going to see Bebop Deluxe in 1976, was to get an album free of charge. So we're going to get back to the punk stuff again. So we're going on to number 16. Now, one of my favourite punk bands of all time was the band from Melbourne, Australia, the Saints. And it was the Saints who first released the first single. A lot of people think it was The Damned with New Rose, but long before that, the Saints had released I'm Stranded. And it's still one of the greatest punk singles ever. So anyway, we went to see the Adverts who were supported by the Saints, and that was in Clouds, the nightclub Clouds in Edinburgh, and that was on the 28th of October 1977. And I have to say, I wish I could remember more about the gig. I don't know, we usually had a few pints beforehand, and I can't remember too much about it. I remember the adverts doing Gary Gilmore's eyes and that kind of stuff, the big stuff, and I can't remember the Saints at all, and it's such a shame. We're going to see them. They're on their 50th anniversary tour in Glasgow in November, so I'm absolutely made up for that. I can't wait to see that. Still incredible band. So that was the adverts and the Saints. Number 15. Here's a really cool one. So this was on the 9th of November 1977 in the Usher Hall in Edinburgh for a hefty £2.50. My wife and I went, was my girlfriend at the time, we went to see Graham Parker and the Rumour, who were supported by Southside Johnny and the Ashbury Dukes. And that was a mega gig. It was absolutely brilliant. Southside Johnny were superb with the saxophones and all that kind of stuff. And Graham Parker with his kind of quintessential English pub rock, pared back sound. It was such a good gig. Probably the wrong place to see them. I would much have preferred to see them in a standing venue rather than a concert hall like the Usher Hall. But nonetheless, that's a great gig. That came in number 15. Now this is an absolute iconic one. If you have a look up here, there's a poster on my wall here, which is the Jam, the Rezillos and the Joel. Friday, 15th of July, from 9 p.m. to 1 a.m. We were out late then. We were young. And it was £1.50 to go and see that. It was an incredible gig. Right? It was an incredible gig because the Jolt was a Scottish band. The Jolt started off on a stage up here at one end of the hall. And all the crowd came up and were watching the Jolt doing their punky thing, right? And then when the Jolt finished, almost immediately there was another stage at the bottom. And then everybody went down the bottom to see the Rezillos, who were, in essence, the Rezillos were a kind of Scottish, almost like they took punk not quite as serious as other people. There was a lot of kind of jokey stuff in there and fun stuff in their songs, but they were such a great band, some brilliant songs, you know, Top of the Pops and all that kind of stuff, absolutely brilliant. And then when the Jam came on, and come on, it's the talking about a power trio. The Jam were absolutely fantastic, and they came on, and then everybody rushed down the bottom to see the Jam. It was absolutely superb. It was superb, and that was in Clouds, I think. Yeah, that was in Clouds as well. And yeah, to see the Jam, it's been amazing. I've seen Paul Weller since a couple of times, but that's the only time I ever saw the Jam in their original lineup, shall we say. And of course the debut album had just came out and everybody was going bonkers over that, which is fantastic. So that was number 14 on my list. Number 13 on the list is one of my absolute heroes. So I think I mentioned this in another video as well. My girlfriend at the time, we were walking up the street in Edinburgh, and we're outside the Odeon Theatre, and we saw that there was a concert on, and I had never heard of this guy before. His name was John Martin, and I thought, let's take a risk. I mean, it had started. So we came in and we said, any tickets left? We managed to buy a ticket. We started to walk up the stairs, and there was this amazing noise, and I thought, wow, what's going on here? This is some band. I mean, the John Martin band, never heard of them. Got up the stairs, came over the lip, looked down, just to discover it was one guy, John Martin, with one guitar, with all his pedals, doing all his echoes and his reverbs and his distortion and repeating, and oh my God, I just stood there and went, this is incredible. Now since then, I've seen John dozens of times. I've met him loads of times. My daughter Beverly, you see this picture up here, this is meeting John when Beverly was 1 year old, and of course it was John and Beverly Martin, so Beverly's been named after Beverly Martin. I photographed John during the Cool Tide sessions. I would regard them as a friend, but mainly I would regard them as being one of the most astonishing guitar players that Britain's ever produced, one of the most astonishing songwriters that Britain's ever produced, going from the folk through to jazz experimentation, through to rock, through to 80s rock, which I wasn't quite as keen on, and reggae, and he's got all sorts of stuff in there. He's a incredible guy, and sadly, you know, left us, you know, many years ago. But I still listen to John a lot, and that was the first time I'd seen John Martin. So that's a very special gig for me. Okay, well, we're going to go to number 12 now. We're getting down here, and it's a really excellent stuff. So Elvis Costello, I was a massive Elvis Costello fan. I actually love Elvis Costello. I think he's one of the greatest songwriters. You know, witty, clever. You know, at the beginning he was pure punk, and you know, and now he's such a talent. We saw him a few years back at the Playhouse Theatre, and he did the thing where he had the big spinning wheel, and he had hundreds of songs, and he was spinning it, and he could play anything. It's just amazing. But we saw him 5 times in a week. 5 times in a week. So in March 1978, we saw him in Edinburgh, in Glasgow, in West Calder, in Falkirk, and in Newcastle. We were such big fans. I was also buying all his stuff. So I was buying like all the different versions of like My Aim Is True. So I had like 6 versions of My Aim Is True. The American one had a different track on it, blah blah, different covers, all that sort of stuff. I was a mad Elvis Costello fan. You know, stupid Elvis Costello fan. But yeah, Elvis at that point in 1970, 1978, 1977 was a maniac on stage. He was when he did stuff like Watch the Detectives, it was just in your face power, and it was brilliant to see. And these gigs you could get right up the front. You know, you were there. Elvis was there, right there, and you know, you could see everything, you could feel everything, you could feel it. It was brilliant. So that was Elvis. I'm going to talk about Elvis again in number 11, because this is an absolute epic gig, and I don't know if it's in shot, but it is. It's a poster up here behind this light. And that's Stiff's Greatest Stiffs Live. So the Stiff record label in the UK, punk label, if it ain't stiff, it ain't worth a fuck, was the logo, which is, or the slogan, which is a cracker. But we went to see the live Stiff gigs in the Apollo in Glasgow, and that was on October 13th, 1977, right? And that featured, right, listen to this, that was Elvis Costello, Ian Dury, Nick Lowe, Reckless Eric, and Larry Wallace all on the same bill. And they did a second one. It wasn't quite as impressive as the first one, but certainly as a lineup, that is something else. And it was right at the beginning of that punk thing. So it was superb, yeah. I'm going to kind of talk a little bit, and the next one, which is number 10, I'm going to talk a little bit about the punk again, but it's American punk this time, because we saw Television and, listen to it, Blondie's first ever gig in the UK. We saw that on May the 22nd, 1977 at the Glasgow Apollo for £2.50. Amazing. Television, Marky Moon had been out at that stage. Oh my God, what an album, right? But Blondie, Ex-Offender, In the Flesh, that type of stuff had just been released. And we had really no idea about what she looked like or what the band were like. And they were incredible when they came on stage. Absolutely loved it. And Television were brilliant. And we saw Television just before Tom Verlaine died there in Glasgow. Absolutely superb. So we saw them almost 50 years apart. Absolutely brilliant. So that was Television and Blondie. Right, I'm going to go to a cracker now. This is number 9. This was called, let me just see here, the Edinburgh Rock Festival. It took place on the 1st of September 1979, and that was in Ingliston Theatre. Ingliston Showground, where they have the Highland Show and all that kind of stuff in Edinburgh. And listen to this for a lineup, right? Van Morrison, Talking Heads, The Chieftains, The Undertones, Squeeze, Steel Pulse, The Cuban Heels. And I think there was more. There was more punky guys came on at the beginning. And we went up there so excited, right? So we had rucksacks full of beer and wine and stuff. And then we got searched at the beginning of the day, so the concert had just started, and we got searched, and they confiscated. We had a choice. They either confiscated all the drink and we went in, or we drank all the drink and then went in. I'm gonna ask you to tell me, what do you think we did? So about an hour later, with like 10 cans of beer in us and some wine, we managed to stagger into the gig. And can't remember too much about the beginning of it. I do remember Talking Heads were brilliant. I do remember that the Chieftains, I think, should have been on earlier because everybody was kind of getting hyped up with all the bands, and then the Chieftains kind of brought it back down again. And I remember Van being a pussy, right? So I remember Van, basically his changing room was across there, and the stage was across here. And it was raining a bit, and he wouldn't come out because it was raining, even if he had a brolly. And he played a pretty decent set actually, but I do remember it so much because of because of the drink beforehand. It was an amazing experience to see that gig anyway. So that was number 9. Right, here's a cracker. So this is number 8 on the list. And we're back to the punk again, and this happened, it's a very famous gig. This happened on August the 19th, 1977. We went to see Generation X, and it was supposed to be at Clouds nightclub in Edinburgh. And what happened was, they didn't have a license, and there was a big stooshy. A stooshy is a mess with, people going, what we're going to do. So what I decided to do was I decided to bus everybody to a place called West Linton. Now West Linton is a tiny little village, like 15, 20 miles from Edinburgh. And there was a place called the Pantiles Hotel. And the Pantiles Hotel was a kind of country hotel, and they have like the Rotary Club there and serve prawn cocktails and and Black Forest gatos and stuff like that. People with suits. It was like bizarre. And all of a sudden, all these buses with all these mental punks compiling out these buses and then into the gig. Well, as soon as the backing band, by the way, was Johnny and the Self-Abusers, and Johnny and the Self-Abusers was Jim Kerr and cohorts, and Jim, of course, they then formed Simple Minds after that. But when Generation X came on, everybody was just throwing beer and everybody was soaking, and it was mental. And I got beaten up with the bouncers. My mate got beaten up with the bouncers. The guy, my school teacher, Paul Burgess, Paul took us that day, and Paul got beaten up with the bouncers. I think there was a female of our party got beaten up with the bouncers as well. They had no idea how to cope with this stuff going on with all these punks, right? And it was a kind of epic gig for that. So it's managed to get to number 8 in my list. The other one I want to mention is The Clash. The Clash were a huge band, and this was number 7. And The Clash, with their special guest on their first tour after the first album had been released, the people that was on with them were the Slits, the Subway Sect, and the Buzzcocks. Now, that's some lineup. That was in the Edinburgh Playhouse, and I remember that being absolutely manic. I remember, seats getting, jumped on, and, it was pretty punky for a place, for a theatre. Again, it would have been much better in a, standing venue as opposed to the seated venue. But The Clash was a great gig. That was on May the 7th, 77. All the 77 stuff was just epic. And we're going to go back to something a little bit more rocky. 1976, on the 4th of September, me and my boys and a few others went up to see Ritchie Blackmore's Rainbow. And this was, I think, just before Rainbow Rising had been released, and the first album was being lauded, after, of course, this was his first big thing after Purple. And it was a great album, and we got right down the front. We were front row standing up. Yeah, we shouldn't have been standing up, but we were standing up. And I'll never forget it. We actually got Richie through his slide that he was using into the crowd, and we got his slide. And this is the kind of shit you did at this age, right? We chopped it up into little rings, and we wore it around our necks for ages. I bet you any money some of my mates have still actually got that part of Richie's slide. But that was a great gig. You know, we just felt we were proper rockers then, going to see Richie again. That Deep Purple connection. So that was number 6 on my list. Number 5, again, I'm so glad I saw this guy before he died, even though it was towards the end of his career. He was fading just a touch. That is Mark Bolan and T-Rex. So I went to see Mark Bolan and T-Rex on March the 13th, 1977 in the Glasgow Apollo. Now, I have to tell you, if anybody's never been to the Glasgow Apollo, it's gone now, of course, but that was the mecca for music in Scotland. It's totally incredible place. The crowds are amazing. Every band wanted to play there. The sound was great. The stage was about 1,000,000 feet high. If you were on the front row, you couldn't see the band. So we discovered that very soon. We always booked further back. But seen some incredible bands in the Apollo. Had some incredible times in the Apollo. T-Rex supported, right, by the Damned. The Damned, right? We were Saturday night. We went to watch this. I was on the balcony. And the Damned came on, and they were epic. I mean, epic. Rat Scabies was climbing up the stacks and then jumping onto his drum kit. The drum kit was exploding. It was absolutely mental. The crowd went bonkers for them. And guess what? Mark Bolan didn't come on. We were told he was ill, and we all got tickets to come back the next day, and we came back the next day to see the gig, and Mark Bolan wasn't there. So this gig's kind of went down in a little bit of kind of folklore, a wee bit of history in this Mark Bolan gig in Glasgow Apollo. So that was number 5. Number 4, this is a really interesting one, because this is Deep Purple, and it's Deep Purple Mark IV. I still can't believe I saw Deep Purple in their heyday. That was just after Come Taste the Band was released, and Tommy Bolin, of course, was the guitarist. That was July the 19th, 1976, and of course Tommy died on December the 4th, 1976. So we saw him, just 5 months or so before he actually passed away, which was terrible. And that was again in the Glasgow Apollo. Now I've got to tell you, I cannot remember anything about that gig, right? I remember it was a cacophony of noise. That's all I can remember about the gig. I actually think it was really bad, but I was so emotionally caught up in the event that I don't actually know. Now, somebody pointed me recently the fact that the whole gig was recorded, but it was obviously recorded in one of these little cassette players, right? Because the sound is awful. But it is a cacophony of noise. I don't think the band were getting on too well. I think there was a lot of drugs involved, and it just didn't work. I don't think so. I've got it at my 4th, and it's at 4th because it was a very important gig for me. The fact I was crying when I went and saw Deep Purple, I really was. But I don't know if it was great, but it's there. Number 3, wait till you hear this. This is brilliant. This is the biggest mismatch in history, right? So this is a Golden Earring, Playhouse Edinburgh, November the 15th, 1974, supported by Lynyrd Skynyrd. I don't know what Golden Earring were thinking about, because Dutch rock was never ever going to have a patch on a 20-minute version of Freebird to finish off their set and the crowd going bonkers. They were up against it, I have to say. But that was an amazing gig, absolutely amazing gig, and it's managed to get me to number 3 on my list. On number 2 on the list, you can't see the poster, but it's right there. It's the Ramones and the Rezillos, right? 18th of December 1977, Clouds, Edinburgh, for £2. And again, the Rezillos, I talked about the Rezillos there, absolutely great band. We went to see them recently as well, and it was really funny because Faye Fife, who's the lead singer, Faith Fife does this thing where she does the dead fly and she lies on her back and does all that, right? And then she couldn't get back up again because she's like 60 something now. So obviously her bones weren't as fit as they were for them years ago. So she was having to get helped up. But so we were laughing at that. So I've got a video of it, but I'm not going to let you see it. So that was really good. So but the Ramones, oh my God, it just never stopped. It was just amazing. 1, 2, 3, 4, bang, and that just 2-minute songs all the way through, and it's really powerful. I've got to think Andy Edwards, who I love Andy Edwards' his channel. So if you don't know Andy's, check out Andy's channel. Andy Edwards hates the Ramones. I've got a big beef with that with him. So because I love them, right? So that's the Ramones and the results at number 2. Number one is David Bowie. And that was on the Thin White Duke tour. It was called Isolar for some reason. And that was at the Wembley Empire Pool, May the 5th, 1976. I think he did 5 nights or 7 nights. We were there one of the nights. And 7,000, 9,000 people, gigantic hall. Started off really weird. It started off with a film. I think it's a film by Salvador Dali and somebody else who I don't know. And it started off with this thing with somebody getting their eye cut open, and it was amazing because there's like 7,000 or 9,000 people in the hall, all going, ah! It was like horrible. Anyway, I think I've got it up there. Have a look up there. That's what it started with, and then all the band just had black trousers and white shirts, and it was just sheets of white light. So it was really pared back, and there was loads of soul stuff, Young Americans, and all that kind of stuff. It was absolutely incredible. We all had our Bowie lights. So we bought these Bowie lights. It's a bit like what Coldplay do now, except it was probably not as eco-friendly. We all had these Bowie lights, and they lasted for about a day, and then they went. And then we had there was a newspaper called Isolar, and it had all the pictures in it. It was a fantastic gig. And me and my mates went down. We were just kids down to London on the bus. And we had an adventure, a proper adventure, so we did. And not much more to say about that. It's just it's such an epic gig for us, and the fact that I saw Bowie during that period, I think is incredible. So that's my top 25 gigs in the 1970s. Excuse me. I'm going to do my worst now. So I've got a couple, right? The first one I'm going to do is Deep Purple, the same one as I did the best. Because I do think it was maybe awful, but I don't know. so Deep Purple was in there in both sections. Santana at the Edinburgh Playhouse, the 14th of November 1976. We went to see Santana, a very good band. But he just played the album Lotus, which was the live album, triple live album. He literally played it verbatim. He played it note for note. And we kind of just went, this is boring. And it's the only gig, actually, I've ever walked out. And I can't believe I'm saying that for a Santana gig, but it's absolutely true. The other one, went to see Sham 69, who are a bit of a sham, to be honest with you. Jimmy Pursey, I think his name was Pursey. Anyway, Sham 69 in Clouds was a very poor gig, just musicianship and everything. It was not what I expected. Didn't enjoy that too much. And then Eric Clapton. I saw Clapton twice in the Glasgow Apollo. He did a gig with Ronnie Lane's Slim Chance, which was better, not great, because he was right in his drug period then. But he also did a gig with Mr. Pugh's Puppet Theatre. And Mr. Pugh's Puppet Theatre was actually a puppet theatre. And he was as high as a kite in that gig. And he wasn't great playing, wasn't great solos. It just wasn't that great, to be honest with you. But listen, I hope you've enjoyed that. I hope you've enjoyed some of the stories, some of my best gigs in the 1970s. I would urge you to subscribe to the channel. There's going to be more of this crap coming on soon. And press the notification, like the video, put a comment on at the bottom if you want about what your best gig in the 1970s was. It's been great to do this for you. I've loved it. It's great memories for me. And thanks very much for watching, and we'll see you next time.